Hey everyone, and welcome to STN Masterclasses. This is a special edition of Masterclass because it's coming just before the launch of our 60-second horror film festival. The 60-second horror film festival, or Horror Fest as we call it, invites students to create micro-movies that intrigue and terrify. This year's judge for Horror Fest is director and writer Aislinn Clarke. Aislinn is no stranger to scaring an audience, as her most recent horror film, Fréwaka, has been praised by Variety magazine as twisting deep-seated folk imagery into uncanny nightmare fuel. We're unbelievably honored to be joined by Dr. Clarke today for her 3 tips for making your best horror films. So let's get started.
I'm ready, you must be here. Her primary care on shot me.
You're aware the patient has mental health issues, dementia, paranoia, delusions.
I wasn't actually told that. Kid.
Túrim dá leid agad sa céir is piano son.
The clock to what am Finos. No on. I'm ready, you must be here. Walk to a good pilly.
Tá tú grímal ar tain. Tusa atá si d'íra.
I'm Aislinn Clarke. I am a writer-director. I work mostly in horror, and how I got there is a twisty, turny road. So, I always loved movies. I always loved horror films. My dad was a big horror film fan. When I was growing up, we spent a lot of time watching at the weekend. You know, we'd go to the video shop and rent a couple of horror movies. I saw a lot of stuff that I probably wasn't really old enough to see, in fairness, in retrospect. But that's where I developed kind of the bug, I suppose. And then when I'm from a working class background, and maybe some of the people watching will be as well, so there's always this pressure to feel like you have to get a job. You have to do something that will, where you'll get paid. So when I went to university, I was the first person in my family to do that, and I didn't study film right away because I thought I'd maybe be a teacher or something. So I did Irish language and English, and then I did film as an elective module in my first year. And I loved it so much, more than anything else that I was doing. I was like, maybe I should just do this like single honors film. So I did. I just piled straight in, and then I just kept on that road in one way or another. I worked in theatre for quite a number of years, which is very useful. You learn a lot of relevant skills, and I think it just comes down to make your films when you get the chance to make them, which is easier now than it was when I was a student. And uh, you keep your eyes set on the thing you want, which is ultimately to make a feature film, I guess. And eventually I got there, and that's the short version of how it happened.
Your films all seem to have a very well-defined sense of location and space. Like a lot of that is country-based, but a lot of that is cultural, it seems. Can you explain how your culture and history affect the stories that you tell?
I think it's kind of like, asking a fish in the very deep sea in the Mariana Trench or something to explain the water. It's like it's there, and it just is, and I don't know if I could avoid it even. And especially with a film like both of the feature films that I've made were very Irish in very different ways, but they're exploring specific Irish problems, let's put it like that. So the tools that I'm using to explore these things are therefore, from the culture and of the culture, and it's just how it is. I don't think know how I would tell those stories otherwise. But also, as I say, a large part of it just comes totally naturally. It just
Hmm.
is, you know,
Right.
because I'm not sometimes aware of maybe, you know, certain things that are. But I've lived here my whole life and steeped in it.
Hmm. Do you find that horror films are a good way to open the conversation about some of those things and makes it maybe easier to talk about or maybe a different way to see it?
Yeah, I actually do think that horror. You know, a lot of people say that they don't like horror films. I hear that a lot. You know, I don't like horror films.
Right.
People say it almost as an apology, you know, like I'll be offended or something. But it's what they always mean, 10 times out of 10. You'll find that they do like particular horror films that are thoughtful, well made. They mean they don't like trashy horror films. And some of us like trashy horror films too, and that's totally valid.
Right.
But horror, when it's done well, is uniquely good, I think, at opening a conversation into difficult topics without the need to be too direct, because you're using kind of like dream space, dream logic, and metaphor, um, and just the image, the pure image, uh, to start the conversation, to ask the question, I guess. So yeah, I think it can be when it's done well, which isn't all of the time, but it can be useful in that way. Whereas drama, I think, has to work a lot harder to do that,
Yeah.
and can be more not as elegant when it comes to handling stuff like that.
So you said you grew up enjoying films, watching films, maybe even some that in retrospect you may not have needed to see at the time, but it still left an impression on you. And that love kind of started early. So if you were able to go back and talk to your younger self when you were kind of that high school age, what advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now? What advice would you want to give yourself for coming up either into that industry or like pursuing that passion?
Uh, First of all, even though I wouldn't necessarily say that a 7-year-old should see The Exorcist, I actually am glad that I did. And a funny thing about those early experiences with watching horror films is that my parents did censor them to some extent. So I'd be made to leave the room, and but I would sit on the stairs right outside the door, and I was listening. So I actually filled in those blanks with what was happening much more vividly, and they were far more terrifying than what was really happening. And that has informed how I actually make horror films, because a lot of it is what you're not seeing. It's what's going to come or what's just out of the frame. But in terms of the advice that I'd give myself, I think when I was you know, say a teenager or whatever, I never in 1,000 years would have thought that I would end up making horror films. It didn't even cross my mind to dream of such a thing. But I think I would encourage myself to keep the interest that I had. The thing is, it's not an easy path. So I don't want to give anyone the impression that it is, because it's not. And it hasn't been easy. I don't know anyone who it's been easy for, really.
Sure.
But maintaining your love for the thing, keeping that alive. Um, so in my way, it's kind of like I always had to put food on the table, you know, I always had to pay the bills. So I was working on other things, but I was always trying to find something that was sort of tangentially in the area that I loved. And eventually that sort of worked as a North Star that got me to where I was.
What advice would you have for students when it comes to kind of finding their own voice? You know, how much do they take from other directors to mimic an homage, and how much do they kind of how do they start finding that authentic voice that is their own so that they can start kind of speaking from their own perspective and kind of adding to the conversation that way?
I think that the best thing to do, and this actually applies no matter, you know, what stage you're at, really, um, you are seeking to present something that is truthful in some ways. So something that you've felt, something that's in your nightmares, something that you find scary, and then presenting that to the audience. So I think you find the idea first, the thing that it is, that thing that gets you. I think sometimes people make horror films, it's always a mistake for someone who doesn't like horror films actively to think, oh, I can make a horror film. And they're never good. I've seen them. They have to have
Right.
authenticity. They're not going to work. And I think, yeah, you start from that place of the idea, what is the creepy thing? What is the nightmare I had when I was 8 that I still think about? Like, what's that thing that's unique to me? We all have these little nuggets along the way somewhere, something that your grandmother said one time that wasn't meant to be creepy, but actually is kind of really creepy. Like our own experiences and weird little moments. I think find that thing, make that it's your unique thing. Find it, and then you're looking at directors. You're looking at how things are framed. You're looking at how to, what to include or what your color palette might be, whatever. But that comes after you get your idea, and the idea has to come from you, from like deep in the psyche, ideally.
All right, so what are your 3 tips for high school students who are making horror films? How can they make better ones?
I think there are, if I have to pick 3 kind of fundamental rules that I think every good horror film has to have, I think the first one is to tell the truth. So that is to find something from yourself, from your own uh, psyche somewhere that is honest, maybe even like vulnerable, maybe even a little bit uncomfortable for you to share, and you're presenting that. So if we think of, there's a moment like this that I actually really enjoy in Hereditary, where the son comes home after the incident in the car and he goes to bed and he just lies there. And it's not a traditional horror beat in any sense, and the camera just stays on him. And we're in that moment of, I think we all kind of reckon, none of us have had a moment exactly like that, but we all recognize that feeling of having done something really bad and you're going to get in trouble with your parents, but you don't want to admit that you've done it yet. So it's
Right.
actually a very recognizable universal moment, but it's given this really heightened edge in the story, and it makes it horror. And
Mm.
then that moment comes back later when he's in the classroom and his face is kind of stretched as it was on the pillow when he was lying in his room and he didn't tell his mum what had just happened. I think finding these moments um, of universal or very individual, uh, private fear and presenting them is a really great place to start
Mm.
from. And we often hear the people say, there's no unique experiences. Um, Very often something that you think is very individual to you actually will resonate with a lot of other people too, and it'll make your piece feel fresh in a way and like sort of honest, I guess. And that's something that when I see the best student films, they have that feeling of
Mm.
like freshness and honesty and kind of vulnerability. I think that's a great thing to have, and every good horror film has it to some extent. Then I think establishing anxiety and discomfort before you actually get to the horror is really useful. So a lot of horror films do this too. It'll be something like people are moving house. So moving house is one of the top most stressful things you'll experience in your life. We've all heard that before. So you're starting from a position of already being somewhat anxious, somewhat in discomfort before you get to the actual horror elements, whatever they are. I think that is uh, almost every horror film has that to some extent. It starts with that, and student film, it can be anything. It can be a student's first day at a new school. That's anxious. We're already there, and then you're already at level 3. So getting people to it's much easier. So that's a good one. And then I think something that is overlooked, but it's absolutely crucial. And I think there are professional filmmakers sometimes who really fall down on this is the importance of sound in horror films, the importance of silence as well, uh, quietness before the thing happens. So, like if you want to think of it like the held breath before the scream, that's actually where the horror happens. So when the audience are sitting there going, something's going to happen, what's going to happen? That is when it's horror. The moment when the thing happens is actually a release. The moment when the killer jumps out, whatever, it's almost a relief. That's why sometimes people laugh in the movie theater when the thing actually happens. So you want to exploit that tension, those moments of, like I think of it as like the silence before the scream, make the most out of them, and think a lot about sound and what sound is doing. It gets overlooked a lot. You can lay a lot of ground of tension, fear, atmosphere with the sound. So don't sleep on that.
Now what we're going to do is shift gears, and we're going to take a look at one of the finalist films from last year's Horror Fest and have you give us some feedback on it. So, you ready to look at a student film?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go. Okay, so what is your feedback?
I think that this is a really strong piece. I think it deserved to make it into the finals. It was a finalist,
Yes.
wasn't it? Yeah. And I think it's what I like about this in particular is that it's a little clean, neat idea. So very often when people are making short films, it's like they try to cram far too much into it. This spins on one little idea. It's not trying to be a mini feature film. And I think that's very effective. And that's definitely what, and this is an ultra short film, but even in longer short films, that's what you should be trying to do. Find the central idea and keep it focused on that rather than have too many different competing elements. I think also reflecting uh, something that is of relevance in contemporary society, right? It's essentially about how technology is removing us from the real experience of life. You could look at it in that way, which is something that we're all experiencing every day when we're getting lost in our phones instead of actually having a conversation with our family or whatever. People don't sit around the dinner table anymore and actually talk. So I think it does all of that really well, and it's smart and confident and kind of direct and clean. I think if I was going to critique it on anything, um, I think that maybe I would, the character that is in the kind of virtual reality space with the actual, the goggles and everything. Um, I would have, it's really just like production design things.
Yeah.
I think that potentially I might have had, there was something about the wires that were coming from the back into her arms or something that actually, when they were shaking as she was moving, made me feel the opposite of what they were supposed to. They were supposed to make you feel that she connected up to some kind of IVs or whatever. It made her feel more like powerful, more like she could move them. Do you know what I
Oh,
mean?
I do,
Whereas
yeah. That's
like
interesting.
immobile or something, or if there was, uh, if she was being fed somehow, or it was happening in some automatic way, and she was immobile, I would feel more,
Hmm.
would be
Like she
more,
was powerless at that point, yeah.
yeah, because it felt like she was complicit in it in a way that I'm not sure the film meant us to feel. But I
That's
mean, like,
interesting, yeah.
also it might have, I would have personally, I think, wanted to have more people in the scene, not in the scene, in the version where she's, in the more nice, she's eating the food. If that
Sure.
was like a restaurant with other tables, people, um, or at least the sense of, I didn't feel like there was anyone else there,
Right.
and we're missing some of the contrast of this person in this dark room alone versus this person in this. She thinks she's here, and the here that she thinks she's in wasn't could have been fuller.
So thank you so much for sitting in with us on the masterclass here and all of your good advice before Horrorfest. And it's been great to have you with us.
Well, it's been really fun talking to you and to all the students watching. I wish you the absolute best in making your horror pieces. And it's not easy, but I know you're all going to do a really great job.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
And thank you.
If you'd like to see any of Dr. Clarke's work, such as The Devil's Doorway or her most recent film, Fréwaka, you can watch them both on AMC Plus or Shudder, and I highly recommend it. Remember, Good horror is about good storytelling, and substance is always more important than special effects. We'd like to thank Dr. Clarke for joining us today, and thank you all for your interest and participation in the STN 60-Second Horror Film Festival. My name is Josh Cantrell, and we'll see you again soon with another Masterclass.